morning, everybody. I'm Lori with Lewis. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have a packed day, so we're going to try to keep on schedule this morning. I have a few housekeeping notes to mention, and then I'll turn it over to Terry. So if you haven't noticed, we have some charging stations around. Right next to the registration desk, there's one. There's a business center up on the second floor, the hospitality suite up there. To the left, there's a business center with a printer and a computer in case you need to print anything out that you forgot today. There's also charging stations up there as well. On the second floor, well, there's restrooms here on the first floor right outside of the auditorium. On the second floor, we have gender-neutral restrooms. There's 2 of those. And then there's also a mother's room up there right outside of the breakout sessions. Let's see. At lunch today, we're going to have table topics. If you don't want to participate in a table topic, there will also be tables that have no topic. The table topics are suggestions, so if there is a subject that you want to discuss, look for that and sit at that table. Let's see. If you have a dietary restriction, you should have a little dot on your name tag. If you do not, go see the registration desk and they can help you out. The dietary restriction meals will be over to the right of the regular buffet, so check that out. Let's see. The session, the future of EBSCO Discovery Services, which was going to be tomorrow at 1:45. That one has been canceled due to an illness. They couldn't make it. If you have not gotten onto the Wi-Fi yet, it is open. It's just guest, no password. There's also EduRoam here, so if you have EduRoam at your campus, you can log on to that. And then the party. So tonight we're having our user appreciation party from 5 to 7. So as soon as that session ends, head over to a main event. You do need to have a ticket because we did have a final, a firm head count that we had to give them. So you should have a ticket in your badge at the back. There will be a party ticket in there if you RSVP'd. So just make sure that you bring that with you when you come to the party this evening. And we're really looking forward to that. So welcome to LUC 2019, and we're going to go ahead and get started.
Please clap for Lori Blandino. Y'all have no idea how much she's done and how much wrangling she's done from the team and all the members to make today possible. So thank you, Lori. Appreciate it. Okay, this is a new development for me. I don't know if anybody else has moved into readers, but I also call them my eaters because I can see my food now, too. It's delightful. Okay, so I have the pleasure of welcoming you to the Lewis Users Conference this morning. This is our annual get-together of staff from our 47 member libraries in Louisiana. Are there any first-time attendees here today? Welcome. Round of applause for our first-time attendees, please. So this is a time to share successes, to hear about advancements from our vendors and partners, and hopefully to steal a few ideas to take back to your institutions. CC BY, of course, please. Every year we ask for your feedback about the conference, and year after year you tell us that the time that you spend with your colleagues is one of the most valuable aspects of your 2 days with us. So we've built in some additional time this year during the lunch and the break periods to facilitate these connections. And then tonight we're excited to step out of the Pennington Center with our usual conference routine to go over to main event. The fun, as Lori mentioned, starts promptly at 5, and we'll have a couple of hours to play laser tag. There'll be bowling and an obstacle course up in the air for brave folks. I'd like to acknowledge our top sponsors that allow us to make the conference and the reception so amazing. First, from EBSCO, I'd like to bring Kevin LeFew, Vice President of Field Sales, to the stage. He's going to share a few words about the EBSCO-Lewis partnership.
All right, thank you, Terry. Thanks for having EBSCO here. Thank you all. We are proud to work with Louisiana Libraries and excited to be here at LUC. At EBSCO, we're just continuing to do things that will make your lives easier in libraries. We're trying to do that with different technologies, investing in that and investing in the people. We've got a number of folks from EBSCO and Gobi here today, so please come and speak with us. We're here for you. We're here for working with your libraries and Lewis as a whole, and we really just appreciate all that you do with us. I shouldn't say we've used Lewis, but we've worked with Lewis on a number of pilot projects over the years, and we truly believe that partnering with Lewis and Louisiana Libraries has served EBSCO and the greater library community, and we continue to look forward to do that. And yeah, please come talk to one of us with EBSCO and Gobi as we're here over the next few days, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Okay, I'd also like to thank and acknowledge the sponsorship of Circe Dynex, who has been a wonderful partner to Lewis for many years, especially in supporting our ILS needs. Today we have with us Barrett Nelson, who's the Chief Product Officer, and I'd like to bring her up to share a few words on behalf of Circe Dynex.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us here at your conference. It's always exciting to be here. At Circe Dynex, we believe in BLUE, or Best Library User Experience, and we truly believe that our nearly 20-year partnership with Lewis has helped us accomplish that. You guys have always been creative and innovative in how you implement your software, how you create a consortium, how you continually grow. We're really thrilled to see that you're continuing to add libraries here in the state of Louisiana, and we appreciate all of the work you've done with us for so many years. You've been instrumental in helping us beta test and pilot new products. You have been instrumental in suggesting how we can make our services better. Sometimes you have been very, very stern with us on how we can make our services better, and we appreciate that. We have benefited from it. We believe all of our customers have benefited from it. As we think about moving into the future, one of our chief things that we use to organize ourselves is both best library user experience, and we believe in the power of libraries. And we believe that Lewis has truly shown how powerful libraries can be in students' and faculty's lives in the state of Louisiana. You guys have been just amazing in everything you've done to take full advantage of the budget you receive, to be creative, and to find new ways to do things. We're excited to be here, and we'll hope that you'll visit us downstairs. And also, we have a couple of great sessions on the future of discovery and some powerful new tools that we hope will make you even more efficient as you serve your community. Thank you.
Okay, and then the other critical group within the Lewis Consortium is our executive board. And I'd like the executive board members to wave a hand for us. And I want to take a moment and read their names because they are so critical to our work. Catherine Rolfus from South Louisiana Community College, a member at large. Brian Sherman, LSU Shreveport, also a member at large. Mary Frances Sherwood of Sewella, member at large. Secretary Dale Prince from LSU Health New Orleans. Debbie Johnson Houston, our illustrious past chair from McNeese. Megan Lowe, our future chair from University of Louisiana at Monroe. And Tim Stam, our current chair from Delgado Community College. Thank you to the executive board. Since we met last year, the board has overseen the approval of a new strategic plan and the implementation of a framework for shared licensing principles, as well as formed and completed 3 work groups to advance common goals in the areas of disaster planning, remote authentication, as well as developed an ongoing practice and procedure to evaluate our core collections. I'd like to, at this time, bring up our chair, Tim Stam, to share some brief remarks about the board, as well as to welcome our keynote speaker.
As Terry said, I'm Tim Stam from Delgado Community College in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm honored to serve for you all on the executive board of Lewis, and on behalf of the board, I'm very pleased to welcome everyone to this year's LUC. So without too many other comments, I would like to introduce you to this morning's keynote speaker, Jess Mitchell. Jess is a senior manager for research and design at the Inclusive Research Design Center at OCAD University in Toronto. But she says that title is meaningless and tells us virtually nothing about her. So here is what we need to know. Jess is often a misfit. She appreciates a critical perspective and values the messy parts of human interaction. Additionally, she says she has a fondness for things in threes and a background in ethics. She received her Baccalaureate of Arts in Philosophy and Political Science from Tulane University and her Master's in Philosophy from the University of Minnesota. Jess has been a friend of Lewis for many years via the open education community and is pleased to return to Louisiana to share her thoughts and experiences with inclusive design. With no further ado, I will turn this over to Jess.
Good morning. Morning. Oh, excellent. So I have way too many things to talk to you about today, but we're going to try to churn through this. I'm not sure, to be honest, that this title means anything, so stick with me. This might be a wild ride. We might talk about binaries, boxes, the grid, and sorting, why we do it, and exploration through habit, form, function, art, and philosophy, and my junior year in college. We might not. For your part, I ask that you do the following. While we're on this wild ride together, please remember two things. That's your homework. That way, when it's all over, I can ask you what your two things were, and you can tell me, why they were meaningful to you. Some things that I'm going to talk about might seem strange. They might feel as though you have no idea what I'm saying or trying to say. That's okay, actually. That's kind of the point. So don't feel as though you have to have clarity about your two things. Try to let go of clarity. When I was asked to deliver this keynote, I got really excited. I tweeted this publicly. I think my head might explode with excitement. I'm going to Louisiana and I'm going to make a new presentation. Heidegger, Mondrian, Gregory Schufreiter, space, taxonomies, perspective, Julie Moretu, capitalism, representation in the circle and indigenous cultures. All right, that was a bad idea. I have no idea what all that means. I should have picked one thing, something that I knew everything about, something not so abstract, not so complex, not so philosophical, but I can tell you're a forgiving bunch. So it's okay that I'm doomed, and I've publicly declared I'd do this impossible thing on Twitter, no less. So I'm going to ask that you tolerate me wandering through a lot of this stuff. And you might say, wait a minute, what does this have to do with Louisiana and libraries? Am I in the right place? Yes. Hang in there with me. I hope to make all of this clear as mud. Just squint if it falls out of focus. When I asked my boss, Yuta Trevoranis, if this was too abstract, she said, wait a minute, who's the audience? And I explained it to her, and she said, no way. They're librarians. They read. They'll get it. But really, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know viscerally or intellectually or personally. We all know the system is broken, or at least not quite right, and some are slipping through cracks. I might just put it together in a different, perhaps strange way. So I want to tell you a story of a pretty pivotal moment in my life. I went to university in the city that care forgot. I knew next to nothing about the place. But I knew that in March, when my hometown in Missouri was a mix of mud and snow and filth, the magnolias and the jasmine were blooming in New Orleans, and it smelled amazing. So I chose my college by following my nose. The city felt like magic. I spent most of my time with the misfits and the outsiders, and if you saw my Open Ed 18 keynote, you know I spent most of my time in the music library. I majored in philosophy as an undergraduate, but to be honest, I'm not sure I knew what philosophy was. I liked thinking. I liked the way philosophy tickled my brain and made me feel a little queasy. So while the other kids were taking LSD and getting high, I was feeling queasy reading Plato, kind of nerdy. When I was a junior, in the third year, an LSU professor was going to be offering a graduate level seminar on Heidegger at my university. I didn't know squat about Heidegger. I didn't know squat about LSU. I had no idea how long it took him to drive to New Orleans each Wednesday night, but I knew that I wanted to be in that class. I wanted to see what graduate students did. They seemed fancy. I wanted to watch them be fancy. I wanted to be fancy adjacent. But I was an undergraduate, and so I begged to be in the class. And this man, Professor Gregory Schufreiter, Department of Philosophy, LSU, anybody know him? Holy cow! He didn't judge me. I think he asked me a few questions, and that was it. I was in. He made an exception. He didn't follow the rules. There were 8 of us in the class, and his lectures would blow my mind each week. And it was good that it was only once a week, because then I needed the rest of the week to put my mind back together. He was teaching the philosophy of Heidegger using Mondrian's art. I'd never experienced anything like it in school. And the way he taught made me feel as though I could accidentally, at any moment, say something profound. I might. Profundity in this class wasn't reserved for the young Bob Dylan lookalike with his tortured hair, his chewed up pen, and his brow stuck in perpetual wonder. As you can probably tell, the context mattered a lot to me. Who was brilliant? Who was garnering particular favor? Who was being judged? Who had cool hair? So this is the pineapple map of New Orleans from 1770. Adrien de Pogger, a French engineer and cartographer, made some sketches of the city plan in 1721. As one author says, what this map did not show was the smattering of huts, sheds, gardens, and paths, paying no heed to de Pogger's orderly vision. Worse yet, villagers continued building willy-nilly, as they had since 1718, and reacted indignantly to this guy coming in and telling them how to build. The engineer later suffered blows from an enraged housewife and narrowly escaped a duel with her husband when de Pogger's straight streets intersected with her crooked garden. New Orleans was a monarchical and totalitarian society. Urban planning decisions, like all other expressions of power, came from the top down with little regard for the concern of the citizens, let alone the lives of indigenous people whose displacement went hand in glove with imperialism, nor the lives of the slaves upon which the entire colonial project was built. Uptown, the Garden District, and beyond was parceled out in what was called the long lot. The unit used to survey long lots was the arpent of Paris, measuring 180 French feet or 192 English feet. I have no idea why French feet are a different size from English feet, but that size reflected the amount of land that one farmer could till in a day. So Wednesday nights, Schufreiter, Heidegger, Mondrian, 2 worlds collided into one, art and philosophy, undergrad and grad, LSU and Tulane, Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and dare I say the spiritual and the rational, culminating in the sublime and queasy. All this within the context of the question, what is being? What does it mean to be? One thing that struck me and stuck from that course was Heidegger's notion of Dasein, a kind of coming forth, revealing of being, a presencing. This is the blurry part. Mondrian's work helped visualize that in a way. My mind was reveling and being tickled by now the written and the visual. You see, Mondrian's work here, the black, the grid, is sometimes on top, sometimes underneath. There's a dimensionality to it. He's capturing depth and grid, coming forth, revealing. The black lines are the flattest part of the painting. The color blocks are thick and created using brush strokes in one direction. The white is actually really, really thick, layer upon layer of white paint. So imagine that, and you can get even further dimensionality from this and a clearer sense of this revealing. Now, Heidegger would write these seemingly tautologous statements like, being is always the being of an entity. And I would squint and look at the Mondrian paintings. See that red line? Sometimes over the yellow, sometimes under. Something meaningful there. But I could feel something, not truly understand or grasp what he was saying, but understand he was trying to get at something in the middle. Instead of falling in line and accepting Western metaphysics from Plato all the way through to I think, therefore I am, he was trying to take a step farther back. What is being at all? Thinking comes after being. And this was asked in the confines of the historical situation he was in, which was transcendental philosophy. And in this context, Heidegger's mind wandered to this place in between. And humans are unique in that we can question our own being. We can forget our true selves, and in doing so, deprive ourselves of our humanity. Heidegger believed we needed to replace authentic questioning about our existence with ready-made answers. He worried that we did this. We replaced authentic questioning about our existence with ready-made answers served up by ideologies, mass media, and overwhelming technology. We took the easy path, and that wasn't good. So here we have Mondrian's Broadway Boogie Woogie, which is a funny thing to say. And I'd listen to Schufreider explain these complex notions of being that transcended Descartes, departed from Aristotle and Plato, wove in Eastern influences, and considered other starting points. And I would revel in the looseness of it all. What if the Western tradition of metaphysics got it wrong? What is being at its most fundamental level? So on Wednesday nights, I wanted to understand, when does this happen in somebody's life? When in Heidegger's life did he start thinking about these things? And I don't know if you're like me, but when I go to someone's Wikipedia page, I scroll down immediately to the personal section. I want to know who this person sleeps with. Who gets them? Who do they decide to spend time with? So Heidegger slept with Hannah Arendt. So I began consuming books of their letters to each other, of analyses of how a sort of Nazi could be in a relationship with a Jew. I speculated about their arguments. I read into their theories. I wondered how they influenced each other. I basically made them into a soap opera. And in the midst of that curiosity, there was another coming forth, and that was mine. I had a predisposition for being overly tuned into the social, but also a lack of clarity of how I fit into it. How do we reconcile the grid, the haves and the have-nots with our ethics? The good city block from the bad? Policing, profiling, with our decisions about who has access to clean drinking water, to education, to where I would go next, to who gets a breakfast, to affordable learning materials, to graduate level courses, to the right to own property on a floodplain. Who was I and how did I fit into this world? My place, my privilege, my birthright. And what would I make my own? How could I find my voice? So this was my existential journey, which brings me back to here. Back to the original land of the Choctaw and the Chitimacha, a matrilineal society. The history in this land is soaked. It defies binaries. It's Atchafalaya. It's brackish in all ways. It's flooding. It's corruption. It's celebration. It's debauchery. It's uniqueness. It's crooked gardens. And a sense of not fitting into the grid. And what compromises have been made in history? Who's been deemed the haves and the have-nots? What do we lose when we align the city with a grid? A pattern so familiar to us, but one that precludes all other patterns. A colleague of mine in Toronto calls this epistemicide, the eradication of a way of knowing in favor of only one. To indigenous groups, as well as others, the circle is paramount, not the grid. What's the impact of putting the grid onto the land, onto the places, onto the people? And this is my land acknowledgement of sorts today. I'm thankful to be here and want to talk a bit more about all of this. If you follow the grid farther back, you see its focus on a point in the late medieval Christian world, the point when it all starts, creation. Then we have the Renaissance and the Cartesian grid, a move from the sacred to the secular, and that grid embodies more of a field where points or axes are marked by quantitative values, the scatter plot. The grid is used in global exploration and discovery, so we get these neat little boxes. And if you look at a map of the upper Midwest, all the land is parceled out into these little boxes. It's very difficult to go on the diagonal across some of those states. And with Descartes, the grid makes an important leap from not only the neat little boxes of location, but the problem solving and decision making in later 20th century design. The grid comes to represent not only the structural laws and principles behind the physical, but the process of rational decision making and decision making itself. So stop for a minute and consider all the grids in your life, all the grids all around you that structure your life. And what impact do they have on you, on your decisions, on your actions, on the haves and the have-nots in your life? What if instead we had something in the middle, something between? What if the edges were looser, the rules more flexible? These are our cities. This is the number of our major cities are up here, and it shows variations on a grid theme. These are our conference spaces often where we share. Notice the exactness of the chairs, all lined up in a pleasing symmetry. These are our offices, spaces where we work. Notice the little boxes of sameness. Computer, check. Chair, check. 3 walls and a cube, check. This is where we put knowledge, information. This is where we encourage exploration, discovery, epiphany, wonder. Notice the boxes, the grid in this library. We devised a system of nothing before something and organize our knowledge. And digitally, this is the space where education happens. Notice the courses, music theory and the history of music, never the two shall meet. They shall never overlap, interrupt, or influence each other. There's no interrelation. And this is a learning management system. You see the inheritance of the grid in so many things we do. And this is the place where we collaborate. We build ourselves into little boxes, mute our voices, disengage our gaze, physically and digitally. This is a Google image search for Zoom meetings. Has anybody ever found themselves in a situation like this, a little box? And perhaps most dangerously, we put people into boxes and categories too. We pathologize and we attempt to enumerate just about everything. Here we have 4 boxes for sorting people with disabilities. What do you think happens when you sort people into boxes? We know that these taxonomies, this sort of sorting that we do to make sense of the world fails. But when the grid fails us, we'll just create a new category. This is street 13 and a half. It'll be a little messy, not as pretty as we hoped, but it'll still work. And if you've ever been in the position of sorting or creating a taxonomy, or God help you creating a metadata standard, then you know what a fool's project that can be. As soon as you have a neat taxonomy, something comes along that doesn't fit, and you're in a position to decide what to do. Will you toe the line and defer to the disembodied rules of the framework? Or will you create a new category and explain the variance? It all makes perfect sense. And much harm has been carried out historically in the name of taxonomic exactness. Taxonomies seem neutral, but inevitably reflect hierarchical structures. Take a look at MIT's list of objects in order of concern for autonomous vehicles from the moral machine experiment. They determine who gets run over first. When taxonomies legitimize and naturalize our patterns of thinking and sorting, they perpetuate social biases like marginalization, discrimination, and a lack of representation. And worse, it becomes harder to dislodge them because now they're codified in a structure. See metadata standard debates for an example of this. I want to suggest that we've misunderstood, at least misinterpreted what science is. We reduce many things to science and describe it as the way to describe all reality and knowledge and the nature of things. Yet beingness, we use science to describe beingness too. It must be measurable, verifiable, reproducible, quantitative. It must be logical, rational, validated, and exact. And we treat data like pure, untouched mountain streams. We know it's not. Richard Feynman, a theoretical physicist, quantum mechanics genius, says it's our responsibility as scientists to teach how doubt is not to be feared but welcomed and discussed. What's this? A hardcore scientist saying that uncertainty and doubt are useful? Anybody here know Rhett Allain from Southeastern Louisiana University? Huh? He's written this pithy but enormously powerful post on Wired about science. It's got a reference to Joe versus the volcano in it. It's very cool. It's called Science Isn't About the Truth. It's about building models. He explains that these are just models. These aren't the truth, big T. In fact, the only way to know if a model is absolutely true would be to test every possible case that applies to the model. That means testing every situation in the whole universe for all time, from the beginning with the Big Bang until the end, and you can't do that. But that's okay. Don't worry, we have good models. Even though we don't completely understand gravitational interactions, we can make sure your airplane gets from point A to point B. We fly spacecraft around our solar system based on models. In other words, we can have models that are not correct or absolute truth, and we can still function, do things, make decisions, and move forward. And if we fail, we can adapt and try again, and we can discover new things. So if scientists can't get to truth, what do they start with? They start with failure. They start with questioning, curiosity, and they speculate and try to disprove themselves, lest they have a conflict of interest or are invested in an outcome. The proving of the undoing is a nice ethical side dish. And they're trying their best to eradicate scientism. And this is the piece that I think many of us get wrong. We start with idea and now we need to validate it. Scientists go the other way around. Idea and now we need to disprove it. More than 800 scientists in Nature magazine, published here, have called for an end to statistical significance. They show that 51% of the time it's interpreted incorrectly. I like the rumble of giggles. I suspect you knew this already, but now here we go. Science is showing us. And they explain the trouble is human and cognitive more than it is statistical. Bucketing results into statistically significant and statistically non-significant makes people think that the items assigned in that way are categorically different. The same problems are likely to arise from other proposed statistical alternatives that include dichotomization, whether frequentist, Bayesian, or otherwise. We must stop this dichotomania. This, by the way, those 51% of the studies, that's the data that we're making those data-driven decisions from, just as much as the 49% of the studies. This hasn't thrown scientists down a slippery slope to relativism, though. They are comfortable not knowing and knowing. In fact, they probably feel more secure when they don't know. It means there's no finish line. We always have space to explore and explore some more. David Attenborough, everybody know him from the BBC? The great David Attenborough said roughly, to great scientists, truth is understood to be truth right now, until another truth is discovered. This smells to me like humility, exploration, and a lack of completeness that allows us to wonder, that in between, settle somewhere in the middle. And then we have Leslie Chan from the University of Toronto saying, when we think about open science, we have to be careful about whether we're thinking about a monolithic concept, that epistemicide. There should be many open sciences. Excluding other ways of knowing is to our detriment. We have some work to do. You see, nothing is neutral. Nothing we say or do is neutral. It's embedded in our experiences, our context, and the historical assumptions we adopt. That's why I told you that story about Schufreider and Heidegger. We make choices, and I'll call them design choices all the time. And those choices are made in a context at a time with particular thoughts and expectations, biases too. And this community is well aware of this lack of neutrality. This was a tag that Aaron Leach brought to the American Library Association meeting a few years ago. It says, cataloging is not a neutral act. Y'all are radical. So let's be clear, folks. If you're making decisions, then you're a designer. And your decisions have an impact on others, you've got some responsibilities. You are declaring this and not anything else. You might have reasons. They might range from that's the way we always do it to the one my father used to use, because I said so. They might include because research shows it's good for the majority. If you make decisions that affect another, then you're designing, you're a designer. How do we do this inclusively? We get stuck almost as soon as we dig in. I want to suggest that there are three things that we need to build skills around to do this well. One is questioning, another is reflecting, the third is disrupting. Questioning, why are things the way they are? What's the history? Where did this come from? We did that a little bit with the grid earlier, right? We talked about the history of the grid. Reflecting on the fairness of that, the justice. Is there justice in that? What about the ethics? Which we spent a little time on with the grid as well. And then the disrupting, to make changes in the ruts of the ways we do things. Imagine how we might disrupt the grid in our physical and digital spaces. If you see a grid, pause and wonder. Pause and wonder, could it be something else? Curiosity is one of the core ingredients to this inclusion soup. It is the roux that can make or break this gumbo. You see what I did there? We're often encouraged to build empathy. I find building empathy is sometimes too big an ask. It still leaves questions. How do I do that? I maintain it starts with curiosity. And so that doesn't leave you out in the middle of the ocean of uncertainty. I'm going to talk to you about these three. Right? Remember my fondness for threes. I maintain there could be a fourth, there could be a fifth, there could be more than three, but these are the three I want to focus on. I want to lead us through some practice of this questioning, reflecting, and disrupting in the three areas that I think have a significant impact on teaching, learning, and education. And I want you to pay attention. The form impacts the function. So the three areas, threes, architectural, experiential, and interactional. You ready to start? We're going to start with the architectural. How can we question this? Can we say, is this a desirable learning environment? For whom and why? And then reflect and ask, who decided? What's the history of this? How did we get here? So you see a bunch of students sitting at a table listening to one person in the front. And then disrupt and suggest that this too could be a learning environment. I don't know about you, but the kids who cut class in my high school and built half pipes and worked with the city government to decriminalize skateboarding seem to have a lot of wicked skills. How can we question this? Can we say, is this a desirable study environment? For whom and why? And then reflect and say, who decides? What's the history of this and how did we get here? And when you look through that history, you'll find the haves and the have-nots. Who got access? Who didn't? And then disrupt and suggest that this too could be a studying environment. This woman sitting on a bench. How can we question this? Can we say, is this a desirable sharing and learning environment? For whom and why? And then reflect and say, who decides? What's the history of this? And how did we get here? It's very pleasing to take a picture like this and to show the symmetry and the exactness of these chairs. But is that satisfying something innate to us where we like pretty symmetrical things? Is this the best format for sharing and learning? And then disrupt and suggest that this too is sharing and learning. And we can ask in each of these cases of disruption how the change in form affects the outcome. Form affects affects the function. This is an indigenous sharing and storytelling circle of the Indigenous Advisory Group at the Thunder Bay Public Library in Thunder Bay, Ontario. They're in a circle. Take a moment. We've tried out this questioning, reflecting, and disrupting in the architectural. Take a moment to reflect on the spaces that have shaped you. That class that Heidegger taught, the Schufreiter taught about Heidegger was in a very narrow classroom. We were all lined up along the long, narrow edge, and he was in the front. It was tight. What about the spaces that have affected you? Now we're going to move on to the experiential. An interesting happened in a workshop that I was doing, a code design workshop. We were brainstorming about the information architecture of a website, and it was a messy activity. So a group of us got together and we decided to individually sketch our ideas and then bring them together. And one participant had a notebook, not unlike the one we got today, and she started the activity and then she got frustrated and she said to me, I can't, it's not enough space. Can I go to the board and use the board? And I said, of course. So she went to the board. You're not supposed to be able to read any of this. And as soon as she did this, what happened? Everyone put down their pens and started to look at the board. The board in a classroom takes precedence. The board is in the privileged spot of attention. The person standing in the front is in the privileged spot of attention. These are those awarenesses that I think we can have about the architectural spaces. So she started to sketch all of the interconnections of the material that she couldn't do on the little piece of paper. Her writing is in white, and then we grabbed different colors of chalk and we started to show the open, exploratory, intersectional, messy, collaborative way that all this information interrelated. And then the next day there was a meeting with the stakeholders to present our ideas to them on the phone. So what do? We flattened those ideas, we formalized them, and we were seeking validation. This is what we presented as the outcome from the collaboration of the architecture section. We dressed up that creativity, combed its hair, gave it a starched button-up and some serious shoes, and we put it in outline form. And in doing that, we lost all the great work we had done. The people who weren't at the design session began questioning the taxonomy of what we'd done and got bogged down in the form and function of this. But we all do this. And so much was lost. Our lens mattered. We all were doing this activity on a piece of paper, and the paper, the space, it wasn't enough, right? The paper gave us a constraint. And then the phone, the meeting over the phone to try to explain this messiness, that was our other constraint. And so we sacrificed the complexity and the intersectionality and the messiness for easiness. And so much was lost. This is what Edward Tufte calls the problem of the flatlands. And it motivated him to create his own press so he could publish his books the way he wanted, with marginalia, with spans across pages, with 3D designs. He's got pop-ups. And this is where he challenged the straitjacket of the flatlands and of the typical published page, the grid, if you will. And he says the world is complex, dynamic, multidimensional. The paper is static and flat. How are we to represent the rich visual world of experience and measurement on mere flatland? He questioned the piece of paper. We get stuck with the experiential. It's complicated stuff. We often oversimplify to binaries. We're in conflict. We want to create safe spaces, but we know we need to get out of our comfort zones. We know monocultures are not often diverse or inclusive, but we hire for fit, and we sit comfortably in those spaces. We often create monocultures. We like stability, but we know to innovate, to grow, we need to change. We want to be the best, but we also speak about the value of collaboration. We want to win, but we also want to cooperate. We create an us to build a community, but our community also defines a them in the negative space. Those white boxes. We want to be positive, inspirational, exciting, but we know that so many of us learn from the negative experience more if we allow ourselves to have them and reflect on them. So how do we reconcile these things? There are no black and white answers here, and these binaries are false. We need both. And I think that's how we get inclusion. Remember? Question, reflect, disrupt, evermore. In our methods, too. We know now, I hope, that we need both and we're no longer at a place where we can either hide behind data or just tell stories. The quantitative, the qualitative, and the anecdotal. That queasy feeling we got from Heidegger earlier. Make a place for that and the data you've collected in well-meaning surveys that might be embedded with biases and leading questions and false positives and. Embrace uncertainty, incompletion, and not knowing. We do damage when we succumb to, without questioning, the naturalized and adopted methods. Are you going to focus on the numbers? Are you going to focus on the humans? Do both. Statistical results, inspirational stories, limited to a set of questions, freedom to explore through dialogue and conversation, reported life, real life. We know these things matter. And we hamstring ourselves by thinking it can be this overly simple. You do not have to choose 5 spaces that understand both. Look at scale, for example. Much damage has been done in education in the spirit of scaling an approach, a standard, or a framework. Scale, to me, is code for do the same thing cheaply for many more people. It's an economic decision. It carries ethical implications. It is an ethical decision to say that one-offs aren't worth it. Ask again, for whom and why. Question, reflect, disrupt. What history got us here? We think that we know what good and bad is, and then we're confronted by something that's both. So, we've questioned. Now let's take a moment to reflect. Anyone have experience with these phenomena? Study for the grade, valuing assessment, not learning. All interactions are amazing. All meetings are great. Failure is bad. Exploration, discovery, epiphany, because we cannot measure them or validate them, are too costly, flimsy, and risky. We should focus on measurable, rigorous, data-driven. What experiences have shaped you? So how do we end up in this conflict? How do we let spaces shape us that we know don't work, and we know perpetuate the experiences that we know oppress and limit? I think it has something to do with this. Listen, I have empathy for us. Our goals are laudable. Our limitations and restrictions real. We want to know with certainty and therefore be able to reliably predict, so we can make only data-driven decisions because they are validated, they are disembodied from us, and we make rules that have edges that are clear and delineated for certainty. And in doing so, we appeal to an exactness in an effort to achieve fairness. We like structure, certainty, completeness. We like knowing. We approach the world with a transactional checkbook approach, accounting. If we document all of our inputs and outputs, it should all reconcile neatly in the end. And we form our institutions, our experiences, and our interactions to contend with this fundamentally flawed thinking. For example, medicine contends with a patient that thinks a visit to the doctor should result in something tangible. Give me a drug, a referral, a plan. And education contends with a student who thinks that if she does everything the syllabus says, she deserves an A. She's done her part in this contract. She's learned. And in the process, we end up right back here at street 13 and a half. And we have cycles of exclusion and marginalization that do not get questioned or disrupted ever. We have kids who do not get an education. We have communities that do not have access to resources. We have mass incarcerations. We have police profiling. We have black boys in hoodies shot for walking while being black, statistically significant or not. Okay, one more, the interactional. I was looking online for an image that would capture the moment, the touching moment where something happens to you that changes you. As you can imagine, finding that image was pretty difficult. There's not a lot of metadata for that. Many of the images involve animals, as does this one. This is Jane Goodall reaching out and a chimp reaching out to touch her. In moments like these, both beings are changed. They're both impacted by this touching interaction. And we all have that one person. We remember their name, the moment, that they reached out to us. They changed us forever. They believed in us. They encouraged our love of reading. They said they liked the way that we thought about things. They said they believed in us. Shoefrider did that for me. Those moments don't scale. Those moments aren't scripted. They are authentic human, and in this case, animal connections. And no wonder they're hard to find. They do happen. What do you do when no one's watching? Someone snapped this picture of a man giving his shoes to a homeless man and then walking off barefoot down the sidewalk. We see plenty of examples of this. People who have an impact on another, who touch someone. The Toronto Public Library has a program where you can check out a person. Literally, you can check out a person and hear their stories. Imagine spending the day with an elder who can give you lived experience of history. The program understands the power of interactions. And those interactions, they live with us. Historically, they aren't always good ones. Here on the left, we have Emmett Till on August 28, 1955, lynched in Mississippi for apparently whistling at a white woman in her family's store. And on the right, we have Devin Myers, August 14, 2019, in Royal Oak, Michigan. A white woman called the cops on him because he looked at her suspiciously. Interactions, like love patches or painful scars, live with us for a long time. You need proof. Look no farther than where we are. 1927, the Great Flood, the dynamiting in Plaquemines Parish. And then Katrina, the fear that they dynamited again. Those patches and scars stay with us. So spend a moment thinking about interactions that have shaped you, positive and negative, those love patches or painful scars. Those are the things we carry around with us. That's the birthplace of our biases. So what does it look like to be off the grid? The grid. Resist the urge to generalize. What happens when we do that? Instead of understanding understand the individual in her context, with the tools available to her and the goals that she has, this is all we are. We can either experience match or mismatch in this scenario. Mismatch we call disability. That's solvable by design. It's not about a person, it's about an experience. The tools she has, the goals she has, and what's available to her in that context. It's design solvable. So you see, the person who has a permanent injury or disability in one arm has very similar needs to the person who has an arm injury, which is a temporary situation, or the person who's a new parent and has a baby in their arm, right? These are those cross-cutting opportunities that we have. Resist the urge to design for. We often make an assumption we can engineer a fix. Technology is going to solve it. There's going to be a silver bullet that's going to make everything more efficient. And we're all smart people who know what's best. But remember, engineers aren't the only ones building things. People adapt items to fit their needs. So look at Pinterest. There's this whole website that's basically built around people customizing and reusing. Here we've got kids' rain boots used as planters, and we've got a Lego clock, right? So that's where that place for innovation, experimentation, you all are doing this in your context. You're doing more with less. And resist the urge to predict and speculate. These are a lot of assumptions in the reality. So we assume we can know and predict everything that's going to happen, and then a natural disaster comes along. We can know the problem and create a solution. We can solve it in a standard linear manner. We can control and predict the requirements. There's an endpoint, and we know what success is. You're going to start a project, dress it up, top hat and tails, button up, make it very serious, and put it in outline form. And speculate about all the risks that you can speculate and think that you know. You don't know. The reality is it requires this transparent communication, this recalibration, because the context is changing. Complex projects cannot be predicted. Emergent or complex systems can't be known. They evolve. And success is something we need to redefine. Resist the urge to know an individual. We can create this persona, we say to ourselves, that represents the possible end user. They have similar and static needs. Never, never. One size fits one. You're completely unique. Empower the users. Give them agency to choose instead of sticking them into a grid and giving them the walking path through it. Be curious. We need to shift our focus to the 20%, and the 80 will solve for itself. 80 is easy. Most people, the majority, look at that data that you've gathered, and instead of saying it's just going to solve for the majority, see, that's the easy part. What does it look like to look at the 20? That's where innovation hides. Those are those edge cases. Look for the failures, not the successes, and ask why. Who decides? What's the history of this? How did we get here? How we design matters. Is every design decision. Every decision is a design decision. And we know that for change to happen within any institution, the thing you want to change has to be a value, something that you practice and continue to challenge and nurture. It's not a checklist. This is like bathing and breathing. You got to keep at it. So nothing is neutral. We're all designers. We're either part of the revolution or else the status quo. So some of the things we can do. What happens if we let go of certainty, neatness, completion, the absolute, the fixed, the inflexible, just a little? What happens if instead we do more to question, critique, be curious, and be open? So one of the things that we can use as warnings as our foundation: beware taxonomies, beware the binary, beware certainty, and beware completion, and ask those questions. Who does this benefit? Who's getting left behind? What's the history of this? What's the ethics of this? Who has access and who does not? The questioning, the reflecting, and the disrupting. You know I like things in threes, so you only need to remember the triads here. The architectural. This room creates an experience. The interactional. The way that we're interacting with the material creates an experience. The experiential with the material, the interactional. The way that we're interacting with each other creates this experience. This is our map for moving forward. So libraries are the place where this can happen. This is a physical building. It's a digital space. A space for learning, serenity, collaboration. Libraries are radical spaces that push boundaries while maintaining them and serving everyone. They're sanctuaries with bathrooms and internet access and comfortable furniture. They're all of those things. These are the spaces for considering that in between, the middle. And libraries can revolutionize publishing, academic publishing. Who gets published? Who decides? This can erode some of the more odious aspects of demanding rigor, which I interpret as excluding the marginalized in higher education. Rigorous. Rigor and validation, those are two words I'm not too keen on. Libraries can draw an ethical line in the sand in institutional procurement. Are we buying tools that work for everyone? Who's being excluded? Libraries can break down boundaries and show the magic of that in-between. Libraries can revolutionize the way we teach remotely and in the classroom. The question is not what y'all will do. The question is, can the rest of us keep up? This is that photo of librarians on the left from New Zealand and the Kardashians on the right. Because above all else, librarians teach us to question everything. I still fret about the grid. I worry about the impact it has on us, the thoughtlessness it encourages, the illusion of easy among the complex. I worry about what's lost because of the grid. And I'm so excited by things like this. This is the work of Julie Moretu, an Ethiopian-born artist who grew up in East Lansing, Michigan. Her work continues to add to the history of the grid, to problematize it. She rethinks and reshapes the grid that has encased us for so long. The one that Heidegger wanted to critique, that Mondrian tried to break open, and so many others worked to topple. Moretu explores the grid by making it layered, including other perspectives, narrative stories. She makes it intersectional, global, feminist. And you know what she begins with? Her first layer is made up of images of city grids. Then the complexity, the layering begins. This is her piece, Diffraction, a landscape that was created a few weeks after Katrina. And this piece is titled Entropia, shows the chaos on top of the city grid. You see it there in the middle? This is what I unhelpfully call the structured structurelessness, the in-between, the middle. There is pattern, there is symmetry, there are grids in our world, and this is what we know is actually the context we live, work, grow, and learn in. The things are unpredictable, they're dynamic, they're emerging and adapting. And when we let go of that notion of certainty, we see differently. Logos, resistance, commonality. We might call that the Dasein, or the middle. And finally, lest we worry that we're occupying space that's not our reality, sort of a cerebral space that's not very grounded, look at this. I see this as Moretu's act of resistance to the grid, her coming forth. It's deeply embedded in our context and our reality. This is her mural on the wall at the entrance to the Goldman Sachs building. She juxtaposes her abstract work in the center of capitalism, within the belly of the beast. Because this is our grid, and this is our resistance on top of that grid. And this piece not only is in the in-between, but it lives in the in-between physically. And so I ask you, how can you, in your context, further engage the middle, the in-between, the coming forth, change, flexibility, emergence, and unpredictability? How can you make the world more inclusive? I hope some of this made sense. Thank you. But you're not off the hook. Look at that. Who wants to share one of their two things and tell me what it was? Yeah.
Have you guys been to Atlanta? A lot of people? So towards the end, when you were showing the artist, Eric, we have a mic for you. It made me think of being in Atlanta, which I think almost defies a grid. While it is a grid, I was not a native there, and if you ask a native for directions, they'll say, go on Peachtree till you see the brown Toyota, and then you'll be at Peachtree, and turn on Peachtree again. So there's a grid, but it is all completely messed up by the fact that there is only one street in Atlanta, and it's called Peachtree, so good luck.
I mean, that's New Orleans too, right? Are you Riverside or are you Lakeside? You can't use cardinal directions. That city resists and rejects the grid. But that's a great example of we live in both. We know the brown Toyota is there. We trust our gut. But we also know that the street signs are going to help us. Why do we reject that space in between when we're making decisions? Yeah. Are you going to... Oh, somebody else. Anybody else? Yeah.
So I worked in Costa Rica at one point, and I had a driver for about 5 years. And I told him one day, you never go back the same way that we went. And I learned for me, because I'm more oriented to a grid, having studied math, is that I need to also work with people who understand the Toyota and the blue house.
There you go. Math is a great example. There are often ways that we teach math. There are more ways to get to the answer than just one. That's that epistemicide example, right? A lot of times, our minds will lead us toward one direction that'll get us to the math, to the result, to success, but it won't be the direction that was supposed to be taught for most people, right? Where's our space for including that? Thank you. Yeah, there's somebody here.
I had a conversation with a colleague yesterday, and I recognized through what you said that I was talking in the boxes and the grid. And what I was hearing from my colleague was, let's try to see something in between. Let's try and make these other connections. And it was meaningful at the time, but it's even more meaningful now as I hear it.
awesome. Consider that we limit ourselves when we stick with the same way things have always been done, and we look at it that way. And I don't think, the point of this is I don't think it's a slippery slope to relativism or nihilism or any of these isms to consider both, to consider the gut, right? You know what's the right thing to do, and then you've got a policy, and we make exceptions. Shoefrider made an exception. He let me in the class, right? Yeah.
One of the things that really came
Hold on, wait for the mic.
Sure, sure.
When it comes to questioning, how do we impart that idea of curiosity when so many people sometimes, well, I shouldn't say that, when individuals on occasion see that questioning as judgment rather than curiosity? That's one of the things that, how do you find that balance of imparting that curiousness rather than a sense of, why'd you do it that way and how someone's gonna, how that impacts them?
I think that one of the ways we start to do that is to recognize that when somebody challenges us in that aggressive way and says, yeah, but where's the data? That's insecurity. That's not something that we should be responding to. Imagine if the whole world, right, sort of embodied this curiosity instead of the aggressiveness. We've been taught to cut each other down at the knees immediately. We teach that in school. We teach that if I give you a problem, you give me the answer as quickly and efficiently as you can, quicker than anybody else. We don't teach collaboration. We don't teach curiosity. We don't teach that everybody's ideas are interesting or at least should be listened to and talked about respectfully. Daniel Dennett just published something that explains how to have sort of productive critique. You can do say 3 nice things and one critical thing, right? I think that we have to wonder more and not be so quick to challenge something and say that if it isn't shown in some data somewhere, that it isn't real. Because we know if you manipulate data enough, it'll tell you anything you want to know or anything you want it to say. So how is it that we're going to get at this? We're not just going to listen to our guts. I realize that we can't scale that, right? We can't trust that. But what if we mix all of these methods, the qualitative, the quantitative, and the anecdotal, and we say there's something in the triangulation there. Let's look for patterns. Let's not just go to data because it's this disembodied thing we feel really comfortable deferring to, but let's wonder about the people we're leaving behind. In that way that science says, how do we disprove this? In that way, why don't we ask, who are we leaving behind? Who do we just fail? Instead of, I just made this brilliant thing that works for 78% of the people, and that's good enough. Innovation comes when you start to look at where the failures are. You start to look at some of the things that we value so much in our lives, like curb cuts, right? Those were built for people who have a vision impairment, who have a mobility impairment, who are in wheelchairs. It's the blurring of the sidewalk into the street. And then they put the rumble strip on there as a hazard warning for people who have vision impairments because they lost the indicator of the fall off the sidewalk. We all use those. Baby carriages, strollers, right? Bicycles, skateboards, though you wish they wouldn't be on there. But I had a neighbor who had a grill he used to come around. Anyway, the idea is anything with wheels, wheelie luggage. You look at the electric toothbrushes we all love. I love my electric toothbrush. I think it promotes great dental hygiene, like very good stuff, right? That came from a history of people who were in rehabilitation centers who had limited mobility. Take a look at text messaging. Anybody like that? That was originally for telephone companies to get in touch with their deaf customers during emergencies, right? There are all these affordances that we take for granted at this, but email, right? Email was Vint Cerf trying to talk to his wife from work. They both have a hearing impairment. Couldn't call her and say, I'll be home in 10 minutes. And he emailed her. All of these innovations came not from thinking about the 80%. They came from thinking about the 20. They came from thinking about how do we make something work in this challenging context, in this one that's not built for success. Take a look at The Detroit Institute of Arts, I was just talking to somebody earlier about this. They're in a city that has no funding, in a state that's bankrupt, and the state was threatening to sell off the art, right? The museum was going through funding cuts every few years, less and less money to do more and more. They were the only arts education for the public schools in Detroit. Public schools do not have arts education in the schools. They bus them into the Detroit Institute of Arts. That's their experience of art, right? So what were they doing? They weren't building iPad apps. They weren't making digital repositories. They brought up pencil and paper, and they started engaging with the students. They said, you know, it's not so important that you know what the Medicis are. How about you connect with this art in a way that's meaningful to you? You like sports? Go through the galleries and find 3 pieces that show sport through the ages and talk about what it looks like, what it makes you feel like. Those are those innovations. They don't always cost much. They require us to think outside that grid, to think outside that silver bullet, that disembodied technology that's going to come along and solve everything for us. Yes.
My takeaway, one of them was that libraries are good places for intersectionality.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yes. Look, libraries have always been those places that have been ahead of everybody because they've had to serve the traditional notion of what a library is and also all the other things that are happening in the context. You know, those comfortable chairs, that sanctuary, that bathroom, that connection to the internet, I'm not underestimating that. That's pretty huge. These are the places that push forward with metadata and are the places where somebody can come in and use the restroom. And librarians have been a very revolutionary bunch in pushing forward where somebody doesn't have access, figuring out a way to make access happen. That's that example of you've got a policy and you make an exception to the policy. How many of you have ever made an exception to a policy at your institution? Chuckle, chuckle. Anybody else want to share one of their 2 things? Did you squint through the blurry parts? Was it all right? I can't believe some of you know Shoe Friday. That's pretty cool. Any questions? Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jess, for being here. Yesterday we did a little quantitative, and the question was, did you learn something today that you will take away and adapt into your own practices? And I just want to see some hands for strongly agree on that Likert scale. Strongly agree. We learned something from Jess today that we're going to take back. Yes. Thank you, Jess. Thank you to all of our sponsors. We are now going to move out of this room, and we're going to move out these doors and down the steps or in the elevator down to the lower level where our vendors will be for the next, I think we have a bit of time for a break to visit, and then we will go into our sessions. Thank everyone.